Hey everyone, Poindexter here, and in this video we continue our playthrough of Fleet Commander Nimitz, along with the Adversary Admiral Yamamoto expansion. In the last turn, U.S. forces lost New Caledonia. In doing so, supply lines to New Guinea and Australia have been severed. Japanese forces also landed in Alaska, removing another objective from the grip of U.S. forces. The Japanese naval forces suffered significant losses, and a second naval fleet was removed from play. Still, the Japanese have enough forces to cause more problems for the Allies. So, let's get started on our final campaign turn. We start by moving the turn count. This will be the last campaign turn, which takes place in November and December of 1942. We acquire our 21 supply points next. We'll start by spending 6 points to bring the forces in New Guinea to full strength, and another point to prepare the 32nd Infantry in the Gilberts. The Hornet needs repair, so we'll spend 2 points to ready her for sea, and 2 more points to purchase Marine Air Group 13. This leaves us with 10 supply points. U.S. Scouting is next. We'll purchase 3 scouts and place 2 of them on Carrier Fleets 4 and 5 in New Caledonia, and the 3rd on Carrier Fleet 3 in Iwo Jima. These are the largest of the remaining Japanese fleets. We begin rolling orders for the scouted fleets, starting with Carrier Fleet 4 in New Caledonia. Remember, the resupply counter is not moved, and we add +2 modifier to the orders. And Carrier Fleet 4 rolls a withdrawal order, which moves the fleet to the Solomon Islands. Carrier Fleet 5 is next. It's a 7, which is increased to 9, and another withdrawal. And Carrier Fleet 5 follows Carrier Fleet 4 to the Solomons. We now roll scouting orders for Carrier Fleet 3. And it's a 19, an offensive. The fleet moves to the closest objective with no Japanese forces ashore, which is next to an area that does. Both New Guinea and Midway are objectives adjacent to areas with Japanese forces ashore, and they are both 3 moves from the fleet's current position. But the objective with the fewest forces takes precedence, so the fleet moves to Midway. Scouting is complete, and we perform U.S. movement next. Since we're on the last campaign turn, there's nothing holding us back from sending everything we have into battle. These are the U.S. naval forces available: 2 carriers, 3 battleships, 8 cruisers, 4 destroyers, and 4 submarines. The 19th Bomb Group is available, along with the newly constituted MAG-13 in the West Coast. We have a healthy supply of surface forces, so we'll send a few of them to Alaska. We'll also beef up our air power with the 19th Bomb Group from Hawaii and the 90th Bomb Group from the Gilbert Islands. We'll send the bulk of our fleet, including aircraft carriers, to meet the Japanese force heading to Midway. Carrier Fleet 3 has more aircraft carriers, but we have more surface ships, which should give any potential Japanese air attack a beating. We'll also send the 2nd Marines from the Gilbert Islands. We'll reinforce the Gilberts with a small surface force and send MAG 13 from the West Coast to beef up our bomber force. And we'll send the rest of our surface forces to Samoa, just in case the Japanese send a raiding force in this direction. Now, we begin the Japanese orders segment. We place moved markers on all areas with only one Japanese infantry or land-based aircraft, and in areas where there are Japanese and U.S. forces ashore. We also replace the transit markers for our scouted fleets. New Guinea, the Solomons, and Alaska all have a total of 3 forces, so we'll roll orders for Surface Fleet 1 first. And it's a withdrawal order. The fleet moves to the Caroline Islands. We move the resupply counter up 1 space, and we refill the transports with 3 battalions from Japan. Randomly choosing, Carrier Fleet 2 in Alaska is the next to move. It's a reinforce order. The fleet moves to an objective with Japanese forces ashore, choosing the objective with the least forces ashore. There are 2 possibilities, Alaska and the Solomons. Randomly choosing, the fleet remains in Alaska. Since the fleet did not move, we'll perform a hold order and move the resupply counter up 4 spaces. We now add +2 to the next dice roll. Since the fleet did not move, we don't refill the transports with infantry. The forces in the Solomons are next. The first order for Japanese forces in an objective is a hold order, so the infantry and both Japanese aircraft remain. We move the resupply counter another 4 spaces and now add a +5 to the next dice roll, which will be for the infantry forces in the Caroline Islands. The first order is a 9, modified to 14, and a battle. One of the infantry forces moves to an area with U.S. and Japanese forces. There are currently only 2 valid areas, Midway and Alaska. Alaska has the least Japanese forces, so the infantry moves there. The resupply counter remains in its current space. The next order is an offensive. The order calls for 3 infantries to move to the closest objective that has no Japanese forces ashore, which is also adjacent to an area that does. The closest objective to the Caroline Islands is New Guinea. 2 battalions from the Carolines move to New Guinea, and we add the 3rd from the battalion pool since we cannot move the last infantry out of the Caroline Islands. This completes the orders for this area, and we move the resupply counter back 8 spaces. Carrier Fleet 1 in Iwo Jima is next. The order is a refit, and the fleet moves to Japan. We move the resupply counter 2 spaces after performing this order. We move the forces in Japan next and begin rolling orders. The first is reinforce. 1 infantry and 3 aircraft move to an objective with Japanese forces ashore. The Solomons and Alaska are tied for the least number of forces ashore, 3 in total. Choosing at random, the forces move to Alaska. 1 battalion and 3 random aircraft are selected, and Alaska has quickly become a hotbed of enemy activity. The resupply counter is not moved after this order. We continue rolling orders for the forces in Japan. The next order is a withdrawal order, but since the forces are already in Japan, we perform a hold order instead. 1 battalion and the remaining aircraft are selected to remain. The resupply counter is moved 4 spaces, and we add a +2 modifier to the next orders roll. It's a modified 11, a support order. 1 of the battalions moves to an area with Japanese forces ashore. There are several to choose from, so we'll select one at random. Iwo Jima is the winner, so the battalion is moved here. The resupply counter is moved 1 space, and we add a +5 to the next orders roll. Reroll orders for the last battalion in Japan. It's an 18, a sortie, but adding +5 makes it an offensive, and the battalion moves to the closest objective with no Japanese forces ashore that is next to an area that has Japanese ashore. In this case, it will be New Guinea, since it is the closest to Japan. The order calls for 3 infantries to move, so we'll add 2 more battalions from the battalion pool to complete the move. The resupply counter is moved back 8 spaces after this order. The last area to roll orders for is New Caledonia. Since this area has a lot of infantry, we'll go through the orders quickly to save time. First, we roll orders for Surface Fleet 3. It's a reinforce order. The fleet moves to an objective with Japanese forces ashore. Between the Solomon Islands and Alaska, the Solomons has the fewest forces ashore, so the fleet moves there. The resupply counter is not moved after performing this order. We now begin rolling orders for the remaining infantry and aircraft. After performing several orders, 1 battalion is making a suicidal run for Samoa. Several other infantries have withdrawn to the Solomons, 1 infantry returned to Japan, and 1 infantry was sent to reinforce the Japanese in Alaska. All Japanese movement orders are complete, and we now start resolving battles. We have 4 battles to fight: New Guinea, Samoa, Midway, and Alaska. Currently, we have control of 5 objectives. If we lose 2 objectives, we will end the campaign in the replaced range, which means we lose the game. Let's hope our forces are up to the task as we begin with the battle in New Guinea. We start by moving all forces to the battle map. Next, we determine the number of battle turns. We roll a 9, which is 4 turns. We now determine the number of Japanese battle plans to be drawn. The Japanese have 6 battalions in this battle, so they will draw 2 battle plans. Next, we select our battle plans. We'll spend 1 supply point to increase our battle points to 6. We'll spend 3 battle points on diving attack, 2 points on artillery, and our last point on envelop. With our battle plans in place, we can now begin the battle in New Guinea. We start by drawing 2 Japanese battle plans. The plans are air combat, which is of no use, and artillery, which is also of no use since the Japanese have no infantry ashore. The next step is moving U.S. aircraft, and we move all our aircraft to the coastal area to attack the Japanese transports. There are no Japanese aircraft in the battle, so we proceed to the combat step, beginning with the bomb run segment. Allied aircraft attack the transports, and Australian Bomb Group 1 scores a hit. The single hit destroys one of the Japanese battalions on the transport. We'll play the diving attack battle plan, which adds another hit, and a second battalion is destroyed. The next step we can perform is infantry advance, and the 4 remaining Japanese battalions land on the beach. We perform the return aircraft step next, and lastly, advance the turn counter, beginning our next battle turn. We start the next turn by drawing 2 Japanese battle plans. The plans are duration and ship combat. The ship combat plan has no effect, but duration will be used at the end of the current battle turn. We move U.S. aircraft in the next step, moving our air forces to the island area to attack the Japanese battalions that have just landed. We proceed to the combat step and perform the bomb run segment. Our 4 aircraft bomb and strafe the Japanese battalions on the beach, and 2 hits are scored on the attack run, eliminating another battalion. The infantry segment is next, and Allied infantry fire at the approaching Japanese, but both forces miss. We'll play the envelop battle plan and roll another attack for the 1st Australian Infantry, which manages to score a hit, damaging one of the battalions. We perform the infantry advance step next, and the remaining Japanese battalions arrive at their foxholes. We return aircraft to their airfield and advance the turn counter. Now we play the duration battle plan. The Japanese have a total of 3 forces, fewer than the 6 forces the Allies currently have. As a result, we decrease the battle turns by 1, making this our last battle turn. The Japanese begin by drawing 2 more battle plans. The plans are Carrier Attack, which is ignored, and Battalion, which places another battalion on the island. We move U.S. aircraft, and our air forces head back to the island. Combat begins, starting with the bomb run segment. Allied aircraft attack the Japanese infantry, but have no luck, scoring no hits. The infantry segment is next, and the Japanese battalions attack Allied forces, but all the infantries miss. Allied forces forego their attack rolls and play their final battle plan, artillery, which score an automatic hit. The damaged Japanese battalion is destroyed. We return our aircraft and advance the turn counter, ending the battle. Though our forces perform well, New Guinea is now contested, which means we've temporarily lost control of the objective. Let's hope we don't lose another one. For our next battle, we travel east of New Guinea to Samoa. A single Japanese transport battalion is making its way to the vastly superior U.S. forces in the area. We place all our forces on the battle map and roll a die for the number of battle turns. It's a 1, and the battle will last for just 1 turn. We next determine the number of Japanese battle plans. With only the single battalion present, the Japanese will draw 1 battle plan. We now select our battle plans. We'll spend 1 supply point to increase our battle points to 6. We'll spend 1 point on ranging shots, 2 points on artillery, and our last 3 points on engaged. We need the extra time to ensure we destroy this battalion, as we cannot afford to lose another objective. Setup is complete, and we begin the next battle in Samoa. The Japanese draw their battle plan, and it's air combat, which has no effect. We move U.S. aircraft, and we'll send both our air forces to the coastal area in a rather futile attempt to bomb the transport. We begin combat and play the bomb run segment. U.S. aircraft attack the enemy transport, and unsurprisingly, both aircraft miss. We perform the torpedo segment next, and U.S. submarines attack the enemy vessel, but miss. Naval guns are next, and U.S. surface forces take their shot at the Japanese. And the cruiser Phoenix scores a hit. A single hit is all that is needed to destroy the battalion and the transport. With all Japanese forces destroyed, the U.S. claim victory, and we move our forces back to the campaign map. We head north for the next battle, Midway. This will be the largest of the battles fought this turn, with both sides utilizing aircraft carriers. We move U.S. forces to the battle map first. Our 2 carriers are placed in the ocean area. We'll place our 3 destroyer groups alongside as escorts, since they have high anti-aircraft values, and all remaining surface ships will be placed in the coastal area. And our 2 submarines will go to the Japanese ocean area. Japanese forces are placed next. All Japanese carriers are placed in the ocean area, since there are Japanese infantry on transports. And the battleship force, which is the only surface force in the fleet, is also placed in the ocean area as well. This is good, as our superior surface forces can attack the lone Japanese transport in the coastal area without interference from enemy surface ships. We now roll for the number of battle turns. It's a 5, which is 2 turns. Next, we determine the number of Japanese battle plans. The Japanese have a total of 7 forces, so they will draw 2 battle plans. Finally, we select our battle plans. We'll spend 3 supply points and increase our battle points to 12. We'll spend 5 points on the plans indicated here, 4 points for AAA and First Light, and our final 3 for diving attack. With all forces deployed, we now begin the Battle of Midway. Before we begin the turn, we'll attempt a first strike. If we roll a 7 or higher, the strike will be performed. And we do roll a 7. One of our carriers launches an early strike before the Japanese are able to move their aircraft. We'll choose Yorktown for this attack, sending all her aircraft to the Japanese ocean area. The Japanese can only fire their AAA in defense, so the ships are arranged into 2 lines, one for carriers and the other for surface forces. Since there are 4 aircraft attacking, all 4 carriers will fire their AAA. And the Japanese are deadly accurate. Both fleet carriers roll their superior value, scoring a total of 4 hits. The F-4F fighter and the TBD torpedo bombers are destroyed. The battleship force fires next, but misses. Yorktown's remaining aircraft dive on the Japanese ships, and one of the SBDs lands a hit. We'll play the diving attack battle plan to add a second hit, and the carrier Zuikaku is destroyed. The SBDs return to Yorktown and will not be used for the rest of the turn. We now begin the battle turn and draw 2 Japanese battle plans. Screening ship and submarine warfare are played, with screening ship being the only battle plan with any usefulness. We now move U.S. aircraft. Both Marine air groups head to the coastal area to bomb the vulnerable Japanese transports. We'll also send Hornets aircraft there as well. If we can destroy these 2 Japanese battalions, then Midway cannot be taken, and U.S. forces will retain control of the objective. Movement of Japanese bombers is next. We roll a die for each Japanese carrier to determine the area their bombers will move to. Shokaku rolls an 8, which is the U.S. ocean area. Shoho rolls a 1, which is the Japanese ocean, an invalid area, so we move to the next higher area, which is the island. And carrier Taiyo rolls a 3, which is the island area. We now move Japanese fighters. We roll a die for the area the fighters will move to. Shokaku's fighter groups move to the island area, while Shoho's fighters move to the U.S. ocean area. Combat begins, starting with AAA segment. U.S. ships in the ocean area form into 2 lines. The destroyer screen fires at the approaching Japanese aircraft, and 2 of the destroyers score hits. We apply both hits to the escorting Japanese fighters, which destroy them. We'll play our AAA battle plan, which adds another hit, which we will apply to the B-5N torpedo bomber. Yorktown and Hornet fire their anti-aircraft next, and Yorktown manages to score a hit, which destroys the damaged torpedo bomber. We'll play the anti-aircraft battle plan for another AAA attack from the Yorktown, but she misses on a 6. The bomb run segment is next, and the lone Japanese dive bomber attacks the U.S. fleet, but misses on an 8. We move to the island area, and the Japanese bombers attack the U.S. airfield, and the force scores 1 hit, knocking a point off the airfield and reducing it to 1. Finally, the U.S. attack on the Japanese transports begins. The 2 Marine air groups dive on the transports and single-handedly wipe out the entire force. Both aircraft score 1 hit apiece. The 2 hits destroy both battalions on the transport. The invasion force is wiped out. We perform the torpedo segment next, and both U.S. submarines fire at the Japanese fleet. One of the subs manages to score a hit, which would normally strike one of the aircraft carriers, but the Japanese play the screening ship battle plan and the hit is ignored. But we will play the sonar battle plan and attempt a second attack, and barely miss on a roll of 3. Naval guns and infantry segments are skipped since there are no valid targets, so we proceed to the infantry advance step, and the Marines move ashore to their foxholes. We return U.S. aircraft next, and all carrier-based aircraft return to their respective carriers. The 2 Marine air groups return to the airfield. We must now inflict airfield losses. The U.S. airfield has been reduced by bombing and only has room for 1 aircraft, so we must destroy one of the air groups. We advance the turn counter and begin the final battle turn. We draw 2 Japanese battle plans, and they are artillery and battalion, an effective combination. We take a battalion from the battalion pool and place it on the island, and it appears the battle for control of Midway is not over yet. The next step is movement of U.S. aircraft. We'll send all remaining carrier aircraft to the Japanese Ocean, along with the last Marine air group. Movement of Japanese bombers is next. We determine the areas the bombers will move to. Shokaku's bombers move to the U.S. Ocean area. Shoho's bombers move to the coastal, and Taiyo's bombers move to the island. We move Japanese fighters next and roll for the area they will move to. It's a 4, and the fighters move to the island. Combat begins, starting with AAA segment. U.S. forces in the ocean area form into 2 lines to attack the approaching dive bombers. The destroyer screen fires first, and the destroyer forces score a hit, damaging the bomber. Yorktown and Hornet take their shots, and Yorktown lands the fatal hit, destroying the remaining Japanese bombers. We move to the coastal area, and U.S. surface ships fire at the approaching dive bombers. Fortunately, no hits are scored. We perform the AAA segment in the Japanese Ocean area next. The Japanese form their ships into 2 lines. The battleship force fires first and miss. The Japanese carriers take their turn, and the Shokaku's gunners prove their worth, scoring 2 hits, and the F-4F fighter is destroyed. The bomb run segment is next, and we start in the coastal area. The D-3A bombers dive on the U.S. surface ships, but miss on a 9. We move to the island, and the dive bombers attack the U.S. island forces and score a hit on a roll of 1. But we'll play the Leathernecks battle plan, which stops the hit. Finally, it's the big show in the Japanese Ocean. U.S. aircraft attack the Japanese fleet, starting with MAG-21. And the Marine pilots prove their mettle, scoring a hit which damages the Shokaku. The Navy SBDs attack next, and the dive bombers score 3 hits. 1 hit finishes off the Shokaku, and the 2 remaining hits destroy the light carrier Shoho. The TBD torpedo bomber is the last force to attack, but miss on a 5. The torpedo segment is next, and U.S. submarines fire at the remaining Japanese ships. And incredibly, both submarines score hits. The 2 hits destroy the last remaining carrier in the fleet, the Taiyo. The naval gun segment is next, and our surface ships bombard the island. And the cruiser Pensacola comes through, scoring a hit. The Japanese battalion is damaged, and will play the ranging shots battle plan, adding a 2nd hit, which destroys the battalion. With no infantry other than U.S. Marines on the island, we return aircraft. The Japanese carrier aircraft, however, have no place to land and are forced to ditch in the ocean. There are no airfield losses to inflict, so we advance the turn counter. The battle for Midway Island is over. With this great naval victory for U.S. forces, We have guaranteed our success in this campaign. But how great the victory will be determined in the final battle, taking place in Alaska. We move the forces to the battle map, and a roll of 10 means 4 battle turns. Now we determine the number of Japanese battle plans. The Japanese have a total of 10 forces, so they will draw 3 battle plans per turn. Now it's our turn to select battle plans. We spend our last 2 supply points and increase our battle points to 9. We'll select ranging shots and anti-aircraft, CBs and AAA, and diving attack for our last choice. The setup is complete, and we begin our final battle in Alaska. We start the turn by drawing 3 Japanese battle plans. No contact has no effect since we aren't planning to attack ships in the Japanese Ocean. But First Light will be useful as well as submarine warfare. First Light means the Japanese carrier launches an early strike at U.S. ships, rolling a 10 for the area selected. However, there are no U.S. ships there, so the Japanese move to the next lower numbered area, which is the coastal area. The lone D-3A dive bomber force takes off and attacks the U.S. surface ships. The U.S. ships fire their AAA at the approaching bombers. We select the force with the highest air attack value, which is the battleship South Dakota, Indiana. And our ships score a hit, damaging the bomber. We'll play our AAA battle plan to add a second hit, which destroys the remaining aircraft. So far so good, as we begin the battle turn starting with the movement of U.S. aircraft. We'll place all our bombers in the island area to bomb the Japanese infantry located here. Movement of Japanese bombers is next. We'll roll for the area the 753rd Kokutai will move to. It's a 9, the U.S. Ocean. But there are no ships there, so we select the next lower numbered area, which is the coastal area. There are no fighters for either side in this battle, so we bypass the dogfight segment and perform AAA next. Our battleship force fires at the Japanese bombers, but misses on a 6. We'll play the anti-aircraft battle plan and attack once more, but miss again on a 7. Bomb runs are next, and our 3 bomb groups unload on the Japanese infantry. And the 90th Bomb Group score 1 hit, damaging one of the battalions. The Japanese bombers attack next and score 1 hit, damaging the ABDA cruiser force. The torpedo segment is next, and the Japanese play the submarine warfare battle plan, which adds +4 to the final attack roll and a +2 superior value. And in a stroke of good luck, the submarine misses on an 8. The depth charge segment is next, and one of our cruiser forces attacks the Japanese sub, but misses on a 7. Naval guns are next, and U.S. forces bombard the island. And our surface ships land 2 hits. 1 hit finishes off a battalion, and the second damages the other. We'll play the ranging shots battle plan to add a 3rd hit, which destroys the 2nd battalion. Infantry attacks are next, and the Japanese 2nd Infantry attacks the U.S. airfield and score 1 hit, but we'll play the CB's battle plan to stop the hit, causing no damage. We perform infantry advance next, and 4 Japanese infantry forces land on the island beach. We return aircraft to their airfields and do not apply airfield losses as no damage was done to either airfield. We advance the turn counter and begin the next battle turn. We draw 3 Japanese battle plans. Ship combat will have no effect since our bombers won't be going to the Japanese Ocean area. Air combat will be useful for the Japanese bomber force, and we place another battalion on the island. We move U.S. aircraft and our 3 bomb groups head back to the island. Japanese bombers move next, and we roll for the area the bombers will move to. It's a 10 and the U.S. Ocean, but again, there are no ships there, so we move the force to the coastal area. Combat begins, starting with the AAA segment. Our battleships fire at the Japanese bombers and score a hit, damaging the group. We perform bomb runs next, and our 3 bomb groups attack the Japanese infantry and manage to score 2 hits, which is enough to destroy one of the battalions. We'll play our last battle plan, diving attack, and add a 3rd hit, damaging a 2nd battalion. Damaged Japanese bomber forces attack next, playing the air combat battle plan, which adds +3 to the final attack. And the bombers score 1 hit, which destroys the ABDA cruiser force. The torpedo segment is next, and Japanese submarines attack U.S. forces. And they also score a hit, damaging the Bensen cruiser force. Depth charges are next, and the battleship force attacks the Japanese sub, but misses on a 4. We perform naval guns next, and U.S. surface forces fire on the island. Our battleship continues to perform, scoring 1 hit. The hit destroys another Japanese battalion. Combat is over, and we perform the infantry advance step, which brings the remaining Japanese infantry to their foxholes. We return aircraft and advance the turn counter for our next battle turn. We start the next turn by drawing Japanese battle plans. Attack plan adds a +1 to all Japanese attacks. Duration will adjust the battle turns by 1, and screening ship will have no effect as our aircraft won't be going to the Japanese Ocean. We move U.S. aircraft, and our forces head back to the island. We roll for Japanese bombers next, and the 753rd Kokutai heads back to the coastal area. Combat now begins, starting with the AAA segment. U.S. battleships fire at the approaching bombers and successfully land a hit, which finally destroys the last Japanese aircraft in the battle. Bomb runs are next, and our air forces attack the Japanese infantry and manage to score 1 hit, which damages a battalion. The torpedo segment is next, and the Japanese use attack plan, adding +1 to their attack roll, and miss on an 8. We perform depth charges next, and the battleship force attacks the Japanese sub, but miss. We play the naval gun segment, and U.S. surface ships bombard the island. And our battleship force scores 1 hit, which destroys the damaged battalion. Infantry attacks are next, and we add +1 to all attack rolls. The Japanese infantry attack the U.S. airfield and score 2 hits, knocking the airfield value down to 1. We return aircraft and inflict airfield losses. With the U.S. airfield value at 1, we must destroy 2 of our bomber forces. Finally, we advance the turn counter, but the Japanese play the duration battle plan. The Japanese have 6 forces on the map, with 3 for U.S. forces. Since the Japanese have more forces, they add another turn to the battle, so we move the turn counter back to turn 2 once again. The Japanese draw 3 battle plans. Artillery and infantry combat will be very useful for the Japanese this turn, while carrier attack will not be used. We move U.S. aircraft, and our last remaining bomber force heads to the island. Combat begins, starting with bomb runs. The 28th Bomb Group attacks the Japanese infantry and just miss on a 5. Torpedoes are next, and the Japanese sub attacks U.S. surface ships and scores a hit on a 3, destroying the U.S. cruiser force. Depth charge attacks are next, and the battleship force attacks the sub, and completely misses on a 10. Naval guns are next, and the battleship force bombards the island and scores a hit on a 1, which damages the Japanese battalion. Infantry attacks are performed next, and the Japanese play the artillery battle plan, which scores 1 automatic hit, destroying the U.S. airfield. We return all aircraft, and our bomb group lands on a non-existent airfield, which destroys it, and the last of our air power in Alaska. We advance the turn counter and play our last battle turn. The Japanese draw their last 3 orders. The kamikaze and no contact battle plans are ignored, but damage control means that our first hit will be stopped. Regardless, we'll proceed with the final turn. We proceed directly to combat and the torpedo segment, and the tenacious Japanese submarine launches her final attack and scores 1 hit on a roll of 2. The depth charge segment is next, and the battleship force attacks the submarine and miraculously scores a hit, but the Japanese play the damage control battle plan and the hit has no effect. Naval guns are next, and our battleship launches her final volley, but misses. There are no other tasks to perform, so we advance the turn counter, ending the battle for Alaska. With the final battles of the campaign fought to completion, we've reached the end of the campaign. We performed the last U.S. defeat check. U.S. forces still hold 4 objectives, which puts us in the poor range. But we were not replaced, so the campaign is considered a victory. Our final battles were memorable ones to be sure. U.S. and Australian forces in New Guinea fought a tough battle with no naval support and destroyed several Japanese infantries, though they were not able to eliminate all enemy forces. Samoa was over before it began, as a lone Japanese battalion sailed into the teeth of a large U.S. surface force and was quickly destroyed. But the battle at Midway was probably the greatest battle fought this entire campaign, as a smaller U.S. carrier force managed to sink 4 Japanese carriers in short order, ironically similar to the historical Battle of Midway. And the final battle in Alaska was a meat grinder, as meager U.S. forces did their best to eliminate the numerous Japanese infantry who landed here. They did cause significant damage, but received much damage in return, losing 2 cruiser forces. The Japanese still control the area, but it's clear they won't be able to hold it forever. Though we ended the campaign with a poor rating, we still won the game. The Yamamoto expansion does add to the overall difficulty of the core game, adding mechanics that can give any player a good challenge. I hope you enjoyed my playthrough and that it has helped you understand the intricacies of this solitaire game of the Pacific War. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk again soon.